The coffee machine made that soft, strained gurgle again, the kind it makes when the filter's almost dry. By the time it stopped hissing, the office felt smaller than usual. Fluorescent hum above, the faint smell of burnt paper from the printer near HR, and across the glass partition, his voice. Derek was laughing about something. My name was in the punchline. I'd spent 7 years in that office, long enough to know that laughter could travel faster than facts. I also knew that once Derek picked a target, he didn't stop until there was nothing left but smoke. He had a way of making things sound casual, like he was doing you a favor by gossiping. That Monday morning was the first time I realized how far it had gone. It started small, like these things always do. The rumor, the one that would quietly eat through my career, wasn't clever or even believable. It didn't need to be. Derek had seniority, charisma, and the kind of confidence that made people mistake arrogance for competence. He said I'd manipulated a client, that I'd taken credit for someone else's report during last quarter's review. "Come on, man," I told him after hearing the whispers. "You know that's not true." He just smiled, leaning back in his chair, chewing gum like we were kids in detention. "Relax, Ethan. People talk. You can't control every narrative." Maybe not, but I could feel the damage working its way through the floorboards. By Friday, my project access was temporarily under review. By the next week, a meeting invite appeared on my calendar with HR and my direct manager, Lillian. The subject line was clarification session. That phrase still makes my stomach tighten. The thing about Derek was, he never said things outright. He suggested. He implied. He laced every accusation with enough self-deprecation that it felt like you were overreacting if you confronted him. And he knew timing. He started planting seeds right before performance review season, right when new leadership from corporate was observing. He knew how perception shaped truth. And I was too naive, or maybe too proud, to play the same way. The morning of that HR meeting, I remember holding my mug, noticing a faint chip on the rim. I hadn't seen it before. The detail stuck in my brain for no reason. I ran my thumb along it while Lillian began with, "Ethan, there have been some concerns raised about project ownership and client correspondence." I asked who raised them. She said she couldn't say. But I didn't need her to. Derek had already won the first round. You don't realize how fragile reputation is until someone decides to rearrange your story for you. I went home that evening, sat in my car for 20 minutes with the engine off, staring at the empty parking lot. My hands smelled like paper and stress. I kept replaying conversations, wondering where the cracks had started. My wife, Sarah, met me at the helm door. She didn't have to ask. She saw it in my face. "What happened?" she asked softly. "Office politics," I said, "and a guy who likes to talk." She poured me a drink I didn't touch. The house was too quiet, like it was waiting for me to break something. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about every time I'd covered for Derek. The client emails I'd cleaned up, the data sheets I'd double-checked because he'd rushed them. I'd saved him more than once. And now, he was painting me as the opportunist. The first real blow came the following Monday. I walked in and saw a printed email chain sitting on Lillian's desk. It was a conversation between me and a client, with a few out-of-context replies highlighted in yellow. Derek had conveniently found it, the kind of find that required selectively deleting half the thread. "He brought this to me out of concern," she said, her tone hesitant. "It's troubling." "Did he show you the entire thread?" I asked. She blinked. "This is what he forwarded." I asked to print the full version from the system, but access was suddenly restricted. "Pending review," IT said. That phrase again. By the end of the week, I was placed on temporary leave. No pay, no recourse. Just a polite, "We'll be in touch." I wish I could say I handled it calmly. I didn't. I spent the first few days pacing, calling old coworkers, trying to piece together who believed what. Every call started with sympathy and ended with distance. The kind of polite distance that says, "We believe you, but we can't be seen believing you." I sent a carefully worded email to HR. No reply. I drafted another one to Derek, but deleted it. The cursor blinked like it was laughing at me. Then, on the fourth night, something shifted. I was lying awake at 2 in the morning when Sarah turned over and murmured, "You always said reputation's just the story people tell when you're not in the room." I remember staring at the ceiling. Her words stuck like glue. Maybe I couldn't control their story, but I could rewrite mine. That thought didn't feel like revenge yet. It felt like survival. Weeks passed. While HR investigated, Derek stepped into my role as acting lead. He started posting more on LinkedIn, vague, self-congratulatory posts about stepping up during organizational challenges and leading with integrity. Each one got a handful of likes from the same people who'd once CC'd me on their praise emails. I started keeping notes, screenshots, timelines. I didn't know what for. Not yet. But I felt calmer having them. Then, something interesting happened. A client I'd worked closely with, a woman named Janice from a manufacturing firm, reached out to me privately. "Hey, I heard you're taking some time off," she said over the phone. "Just wanted to say, I miss your clarity in meetings. Derek's been different." That word, different, was all I needed. I didn't have a plan. Not at first. Just a quiet intention. I wasn't going to fight the rumor head on. I'd let Derek's own habits do the heavy lifting. You can't outshout a liar, but you can let him keep talking until he runs out of rope. So I stayed quiet. I withdrew every polite instinct to defend myself. When mutual contacts asked what happened, I just said, "It's complicated. I trust the process." That phrase spread like oil. People heard it and filled the blanks with their own theories, none of which painted me desperate. Meanwhile, Derek was basking in his temporary throne. He began to overstep, replying to clients too late, claiming credit for a report that had clearly been prepared before his promotion. The more confident he got, the sloppier his ego became. I didn't have to push him. I just had to wait. Sarah called it revenge through gravity. She said people like Derek eventually collapse under their own weight. I didn't believe her until the conference call. It was a routine end-of-quarter client briefing. I wasn't invited, of course. But one of my old teammates, Raj, sent me a text that night. "Derek just froze mid-call. Got caught quoting your draft word for word. Client noticed." Apparently, Janice, the same client who'd called me weeks earlier, recognized a data projection I'd written. Derek had forgotten to delete my initials from the metadata. The call ended awkwardly. 2 days later, Janice forwarded the original draft to Lillian, asking for clarification on authorship. I didn't know any of this until Raj called again, his voice low and slightly amused. "Dude, you're not going to believe this. HR reopened your case." I still remember the exact moment I got the email. Subject: follow up on investigation status. I didn't open it right away. I just stared at it, heart drumming in my throat. When I finally clicked, the tone was suddenly formal, apologetic, and heavy on oversight. They invited me for a reinstatement discussion. No admission of fault, just a shift in power. I went back to the office 2 days later. The same fluorescent hum, same stale smell of printer toner. But people looked at me differently this time, cautiously polite. Derek wasn't at his desk. His nameplate was gone. Lillian met me in the conference room. "He's been let go," she said quietly. "After some inconsistencies came up in the audit." She paused. "We owe you an apology." I didn't say much, just nodded, thanked her, and signed the reinstatement papers. It would have been easy to stop there, but the thing about quiet revenge is, It doesn't end with a single victory. It ripples. Derek resurfaced a few months later, trying to get hired elsewhere in the same industry. I didn't block him. Didn't warn anyone. I didn't have to. Word travels. References are conversations, not documents. And soon, he was the subject of his own kind of rumor, the kind he couldn't control. I wasn't the one who started it, but I didn't stop it either. Sometimes, justice looks a lot like silence. But here's the part I don't tell people often. Even after getting my job back, after everyone cleared my name, something in me changed. I stopped trusting laughter. I stopped small talking in break rooms. Every time someone said, "Can I run something by you?" my gut tensed. Sarah noticed. "You got your piece back," she said one night. "Why do you still sound like you're defending yourself?" I didn't have an answer then. Maybe I still don't, because what Derek took from me wasn't just reputation. It was ease, the sense that truth would eventually win on its own. Months later, I ran into him by accident, a networking event downtown. He looked older, less sure of himself. The crowd around him had thinned. He saw me and froze. "Ethan," he said, half smiling, "no hard feelings?" I took a sip of my drink, set it down carefully, and said, "None at all." And that was true, because by then, I'd realized something. I never ruined his reputation. He did. All I did was stand still long enough for everyone else to see it. It's strange how people remember the aftermath, not the storm. After I got reinstated, the office looked the same, but everything felt rearranged. My desk was still there, but someone had moved the plant I kept near the window. My mug was gone, and my monitor had a new wallpaper, company logo, not my usual photo of Lake Mendota at sunrise. Little things, harmless on their own, but they stacked up. Everyone greeted me with a smile that was just a little too practiced. "Glad to have you back, Ethan," they'd say, like I was a guest in my own house. Even Lillian, usually composed, was oddly careful around me. She scheduled check-ins, used phrases like rebuilding trust, team alignment, fresh start. What she meant was, we don't know what version of you we're getting back. And honestly, neither did I. Derek's absence was its own presence. His old projects were scattered across shared drives like debris. Every few days, someone would open a spreadsheet or a file that still bore his initials. Each time, they'd pause, glance at me, and quickly rename it before anyone else noticed. It was like he'd left fingerprints on everything, but no one wanted to acknowledge it. One morning, Raj leaned over my cubicle wall with a smirk. "Guess who tried to send me a connection request on LinkedIn?" I looked up. "Derek?" "Bingo." He chuckled. "Man's got some nerve." I didn't laugh, not because I was angry, but because I wasn't. It was unsettling how empty revenge felt once it had already worked. For a while, I convinced myself that getting my job back meant everything was fine. But truth has a way of lingering like dust. You think you've wiped it clean until the sunlight hits it just right. My first project back was a mess. Overlapping deadlines, inconsistent data, and a team too polite to challenge me. Everyone was walking on eggshells, scared to look like they were taking sides. Even when I asked for feedback, people deflected. I caught myself checking Slack messages twice before hitting send, reading and rereading my tone. I didn't want to give anyone ammunition again. That's the thing about being wronged. Even when you win, you start editing yourself. Sarah was the only one who noticed how much I'd changed. "You used to talk about work like it meant something," she said one night over dinner. "Now you talk about it like it's a court case." She wasn't wrong. I spent evenings reviewing policy documents, archiving emails, keeping backups of backups. I told myself it was about protecting my name, but really, it was about control. Derek had taught me that all it took to lose everything was one unchecked story. and I wasn't going to let anyone write mine again. A month later, I got invited to a corporate retreat, something Derek had once hosted. It was mandatory for department leads. Lillian framed it as a team culture reset. The venue was a glassy lakeside resort 2 hours north, all white linen and artificial serenity. People mingled around the fire pit, trying to look relaxed. The first night, during the dinner mixer, I caught fragments of conversation drifting across the tables. "He's the guy who got suspended, right?" No, it was a misunderstanding. "Didn't HR say something about falsified reports?" That was the other guy. Whispered corrections. Half-truths passing like mosquitoes in the air. I didn't interrupt. I just listened, letting the stories collide until they exhausted themselves. When it came time for introductions, I stood, smiled faintly, and said, "Ethan Shaw. I handle client operations, back from an unexpected break." A few people chuckled politely. The tension loosened. I'd learned that humor was armor, and that silence, used right, could be a weapon sharper than any rebuttal. Later that night, in the lobby bar, I overheard someone mention Derek again. "He applied at Brindle and Co. Mai," said one of the regional managers. "Didn't last 2 weeks." "What happened?" another asked. The manager shrugged. "Apparently he tried the same game, talking big, undercutting a senior associate. But someone dug up his old HR file. Word got around fast." I didn't say anything, didn't even smile. But inside, something clicked. I hadn't done a single thing. No calls, no rumors, no sabotage. Yet somehow, Derek's name had become radioactive. His own pattern had done the talking. It was strange, realizing you'd won by not playing. After the retreat, work started to settle. Slowly. People stopped whispering, or maybe I just stopped hearing it. I even caught myself laughing in the break room again. Genuine laughter, not the kind that checks for danger first. But some cracks never fully heal. One afternoon, Lillian stopped by my desk. "How are you adjusting?" she asked. "Fine, I said. "Better than I expected." She hesitated, then said, "You know, I never told you this before, but when everything was happening, I didn't push back hard enough. I should have questioned the evidence sooner." I looked at her, unsure how to respond. "Derek could be persuasive," she continued. "He made it sound like he was protecting the company." I nodded slowly. "He was protecting himself." She sighed. "We all were." That line stuck with me. We all were. Because she wasn't wrong. Fear has a way of making accomplices out of bystanders. It wasn't long after that conversation that I started hearing Derek's name outside the office again. He'd begun freelancing. Small projects. Temporary contracts. His online posts got fewer likes. His tone changed. Less confident. More desperate. Then, one morning, I got an anonymous email. "Thought you'd want to know. He's trying to use you as a reference." No name, no signature, just a link to a forum where Derek had posted under a pseudonym, trying to explain his side of the incident. He'd twisted the narrative again, except this time, no one bought it. His story was full of holes. The comments were brutal. Sounds like projection. "So you ruined someone's career and now you're the victim?" "Bro, take accountability." For the first time, the mirror turned on him. That night, I sat on the porch with Sarah. The air was cool, the streetlights flickering across her glass of wine. "Do you ever feel bad for him?" she asked. I thought about it for a long time. "I don't feel anything," I said finally. "And that's worse, maybe." She nodded. "It's over now." But it wasn't. Not really. Because the longer I sat there, the more I realized Derek wasn't the only one who'd been changed. I had too. I didn't trust people the same way. I measured every conversation, every compliment, for hidden weight. I'd learned to live without lifting a finger. But I'd also learned to keep one ready on the scale. 2 weeks later, something unexpected happened. I was asked to give a talk to new hires about resilience and workplace integrity. The irony didn't escape me. I almost declined, but Lillian insisted. "You've been through enough to make it real," she said. So I stood in that bright conference room, 20 fresh faces looking at me like I had answers. I started with the usual points about ethics and teamwork, but halfway through, my voice shifted. "I used to think integrity meant not lying," I said. "Now I think it means not needing to prove you're telling the truth." A few heads tilted. Pens paused. "Because sometimes," I added, "you won't get the chance to defend yourself. All you'll have left is the kind of person people already believe you are." Afterward, a few came up to thank me. One young guy said, "That's real, man. Feels like something people forget until it's too late." Maybe he was right. Later that afternoon, Raj found me by the elevator. "Hey," he said, "you'll get a kick out of this. Guess who's applying for an admin job at your old client's firm?" I didn't have to guess. "Yeah," Raj grinned. "Janice called me, wanted a reference check. I told her the truth, that he's talented, but his talent burns bridges." He laughed. She said that was all she needed to know. When the elevator doors closed, I caught my reflection in the mirrored wall. Tired eyes, faint smile. For the first time in a long while, I didn't feel small in that reflection, just steady. That night, I couldn't sleep. I got up, went to the kitchen, poured a glass of water. The clock read 2:17. I opened my laptop and stared at Derek's old messages, the ones I'd saved, the fragments of conversations that once kept me up for all the wrong reasons. I hovered over the delete key for a long time. Then I clicked it. The files disappeared one by one, like tiny ghosts fading from the screen. It didn't feel triumphant. It felt clean. Sarah woke up as I was climbing back into bed. "Everything okay?" she murmured. "Yeah," I whispered. "Finally." The next morning I got an email from Janice. "He didn't get the job. Just thought you'd want to know." I smiled, typed back, "I never doubted it." And I meant that. Because Derek didn't lose because of me. He lost because of himself. All I'd done was hold a mirror. Still, some nights I wonder, if he hadn't started that rumor, would I still be the same person I was before? Would I still believe that good work speaks for itself? That honesty wins eventually? I don't know, but I do know this. Once someone rewrites your story, you learn to keep your own pen close. The first time I saw Derek's face again was on a job board. Not his photo, his name. A listing on a local consultancy site had his name buried under team experience. It caught my eye only because I'd scrolled past it a dozen times before while hiring for a new analytics contractor. But this time the fine print changed. Former senior operations consultant at Brixwell Industries. That was our company. My company. The one where his rumor nearly buried me. For a second, I just stared at the screen. The memory hit like old static. HR conference rooms, coffee gone cold, the word clarification hanging in the air like a guillotine. I closed the tab, but the name lingered, like an aftertaste. By then, it had been almost a year since everything happened. Life was stable again. Work was quieter. My position even stronger than before. Sarah and I had taken a short trip to Chicago that spring. The kind of weekend you plan when you finally stop holding your breath. We'd walked along the river, grabbed deep dish at Giordano's, laughed about nothing important. I remember her saying, "You're finally you again." I'd smiled, though part of me knew she was wrong. The old version of me, the one who trusted easily, who assumed merit spoke louder than malice, was gone. And in his place was someone who understood patience as a form of power. So when Derek's name resurfaced online, I didn't get angry. I got curious. The consultancy he was tied to, Harper & Klein, had a small reputation, mid-tier clients, nothing major. but they were trying to break into corporate partnerships. That meant contracts, background checks, reference verifications, all the quiet systems that remember. I didn't do anything at first. I didn't have to. Within a week, my LinkedIn notifications lit up. Viewed your profile. Harper and Klein Associates. A recruiter from their firm had checked my page twice, then a third time. It didn't take a genius to figure out why. My name was part of Derek's past, and someone had done a light background search. They were trying to gauge the temperature. I didn't reach out. I didn't confirm or deny. I just let my silence do the talking. And silence, I've learned, is often interpreted as caution. A month later, I heard through Raj that Harper and Klein had lost a major proposal with one of our partner clients. They backed out last minute, Raj said over lunch. Apparently, someone on their team failed a reference review. Guess who was listed on the file? He didn't have to tell me. I stirred my coffee, pretending it didn't matter. But part of me, the part that had spent sleepless nights wondering how Derek could dismantle my reputation so easily, felt something close to poetic balance. Not triumph, not cruelty, just symmetry. It's easy to think revenge ends with the other person's downfall. It doesn't. What comes after is quieter. The slow realization that the world keeps spinning, that people forget the headlines but remember the tone. That's what stuck with me, how quickly people had believed him once, and how long it took me to rebuild from that belief. I started mentoring interns after that. Not formally, just small things, helping them navigate the politics no one warns you about, teaching them to document their work, to clarify emails, to keep calm when whispers start. One of them, a bright kid named Tom, asked me once, "Did something happen to make you so careful?" I smiled. Something taught me the value of receipts. He laughed, thinking I was joking, but I wasn't. Sarah, meanwhile, had started seeing the difference at home, too. "You're lighter these days," she said one evening as we grilled on the porch. "Like, you finally stopped waiting for the next bad thing." Maybe I had. Or maybe I'd just learned how to expect it without flinching. We'd started talking about buying a house, something small, closer to the lake. A new chapter, she called it. I liked that. I liked the sound of leaving the old one closed, pages sealed, until the phone call. It was late on a Thursday, storm tapping against the windows. I'd just finished dinner when my phone buzzed with an unknown number. Normally I ignore those, but instinct made me pick up. "Ethan Shaw?" The voice was familiar, clipped, rehearsed. "Speaking." "This is Derek. I hope this isn't a bad time." Silence stretched thin between us. "What do you want, Derek?" He exhaled. "I think we should talk." There was a small coffee shop near the old office, neutral ground. We met there 2 days later. He looked smaller somehow. The suit didn't fit like it used to. His hair was thinner, his eyes restless. When he saw me, he forced a grin. "You look good, man." "Thanks," I said flatly. "You said you wanted to talk." He nodded, wrapping both hands around his cup. "Look, I know we didn't end on great terms. That's one way to put it." He flinched slightly but kept going. "I made mistakes. Big ones. I thought I was being strategic, keeping my position safe. I didn't realize what it would cost." I didn't interrupt. He sighed. "You know that consulting firm? Harper and Klein? They dropped me. Said the background checks came back with conflicting references. No one will touch me now." I met his eyes. "And you think I had something to do with that?" He shrugged, helpless. "Did you?" I took a slow sip of my coffee. "No, Derek. You did." His jaw tightened. "So that's it? You just get to walk away clean While you what?" I cut in. "While you deal with the same shadow you built for me?" He stared at the table. "I didn't mean for it to go that far." Rumors never do, I said quietly. They just need oxygen. For a long moment, neither of us spoke. The rain outside had slowed, leaving streaks down the glass. He looked older, not in years, but in wear. Finally, he said, "You know, people still talk about you like you're some kind of saint, like you rose above it." I gave a half smile. Maybe they just realized who was talking too loud. He nodded, the smallest concession of truth. When I stood to leave, he said, "So that's it? No forgiveness?" I paused. "You don't need my forgiveness, Derek. You need your own." Then I walked out, leaving him sitting there, the half-empty cup steaming between his hands. For weeks after that meeting, I couldn't stop replaying it, not out of anger, out of curiosity. I'd imagined that moment 1,000 times before. Him broken, me calm, balance restored. But when it actually happened, it felt less like victory and more like closure that had waited too long to matter. Sarah noticed the change again. "You've been quiet lately," she said. "Just thinking." About him? About how little it takes to destroy someone. She reached for my hand. "And how much it takes to rebuild." I nodded. "Exactly." The next few months passed uneventfully. Work was steady, life soft around the edges again. But something about that conversation with Derek left a residue, like unfinished business I didn't want but couldn't ignore. Then one evening, I got an email from a journalist. She was writing an article on toxic workplace cultures and internal rumor fallout, and someone had referred her to me. She wanted an interview, off the record. At first, I declined, but her last line caught my eye. "I think people forget how easy it is for one lie to look like truth when told with confidence." That was exactly how it had begun for me, so I agreed. We met in a quiet cafe on the east side, near the university. She was younger than I expected. Sharp eyes, calm voice. She asked me about the early days, about HR, about the cost of silence. I told her everything. Not out of spite, not to expose Derek, but because I wanted people to understand what it feels like to have your name hijacked. When she asked if I wanted Derek's name printed, I shook my head. "No need. The story's not about him." "It's about what then?" she asked. "It's about how people believe noise faster than evidence." She nodded slowly. "And you think that's changed?" I smiled faintly. "Not a bit, but maybe someone will think twice next time." When the article came out 2 weeks later, it didn't mention any names, but it went viral inside our industry. People quoted lines from it during panels, leadership trainings, even HR seminars. The headline was simple: "When Rumors Work Harder Than Truth, a Survivor's Story." My inbox filled with messages from strangers, people who'd lived their own versions of what happened to me. Some angry, some grateful, all painfully familiar. It wasn't revenge anymore. It was reclamation. And somewhere out there, I knew Derek would read it. He did. A week later, I got one final email from him. Short, awkward, and entirely human. "Read your piece. You were right. About everything. I wish I'd learned it sooner. D." I didn't reply. Some stories don't need sequels. But that night, as I stood outside watching the streetlights flicker across the hood of my car, I realized something. I hadn't destroyed Derek's reputation. I'd simply stopped protecting it, and the world did the rest. Still, part of me understood something deeper. The cost of surviving a rumor isn't just professional. It's personal. It rewires how you see trust, loyalty, even kindness. You start measuring people not by what they say, but by what they whisper. And you learn, painfully, that silence is both a weapon and a wound. There's a difference between forgiveness and forgetting. Forgiveness feels like a door you choose to close. Forgetting feels like a door that closes on you. After Derek's final email, I told myself I'd moved on, that I didn't need to think about him again. But even after deleting his number, blocking his profile, and cleaning out old emails, his shadow lingered in the strangest places. An offhand joke from a coworker, a cautious look from a new client, a delayed response from HR whenever I asked for clarification on policies. I wasn't paranoid, just aware. Because once your name's been dragged through mud, you start noticing footprints everywhere. It was early spring when the article resurfaced. The journalist who'd written my story reached out again. "It's being cited in a leadership ethics course," she said, almost amused. "Apparently, your quote about noise and evidence hit a nerve." I laughed softly. "Guess my pain's educational now." She smiled through the phone. "You'd be surprised how many executives think they're immune to gossip until it hits their bottom line." We talked a bit about anonymity, about how Derek had never been named, and how that, ironically, gave the story more reach. It wasn't just about him anymore. It was about a system that rewarded charisma over conscience. After we hung up, I stared at the article again. The words felt detached now, like they belonged to someone else, someone who hadn't quite made peace with what happened. Then came the conference. Corporate asked me to represent our company at an industry symposium. Ironically, to sit on a panel about reputation management and ethical leadership. When the email arrived, I laughed out loud. Sarah heard and came to the doorway. "What's funny?" "They want me to talk about professional integrity," I said. "Guess irony pays well." She smiled. "Maybe it's not irony. Maybe it's balance." Maybe. The event was held in Chicago, in one of those downtown hotels where the air always smells faintly of coffee and carpet glue. My panel was scheduled for the second day. Right after lunch, the sleepy slot where everyone's more interested in dessert than discussion. I figured I'd talk, shake a few hands, go home. But when I walked into the main hall and saw the attendee list projected on the welcome screen, my chest tightened. There, 2 lines below my name. Derek Vaughn, independent consultant. For a second, I thought it had to be a coincidence. But as I scanned the crowd, I saw him, sitting 2 rows back, wearing a borrowed confidence. The irony was surgical. Here we were, 2 ghosts from the same battlefield, now dressed as experts in professional recovery. When the moderator introduced me, I kept my expression neutral. I talked about truth, about resilience, about how reputations aren't built on what you defend, but on what you demonstrate. People nodded, scribbled notes, cameras clicked. Derek watched me with a faint smile, like he was waiting to see if I'd flinch. I didn't. After the session, a small crowd gathered. Questions, handshakes, business cards. Derek lingered near the edge, listening, calculating. When the crowd thinned, he stepped forward. "That was impressive," he said quietly. "Thanks," I replied. "You really turned it around." I met his eyes. "I just stopped digging." He nodded slowly. "Maybe I'll get there too." Then he walked away. That night, back in my hotel room, I sat by the window overlooking the city. Lights shimmered on the river, car horns layered in the distance. I thought about how easy it would have been, years ago, to strike back hard, to post screenshots, to expose him publicly. But I hadn't. And now, watching him walk through that conference like a ghost of his own making, I finally understood why I didn't need to. You can't outlie time. Truth has its own pace, and it's patient. 2 weeks later, my company's HR department asked if I'd be willing to contribute to an internal training module about narrative integrity. Basically, how to prevent what happened to me from happening again. They wanted real examples, anonymized, of how internal gossip can morph into institutional decisions. So I wrote it, carefully, not to expose anyone, but to build guardrails where none existed. When it went live, employees started sending me quiet thank you messages. One said, I was almost in your shoes once. You just helped me understand I wasn't crazy. That one hit me because for months, that's exactly how Derek had made me feel. Like I was overreacting, like the ground was shifting only under me. Now the ground felt steady. But life isn't a straight line of resolution. Later that year, I got a message from Janice, the client who'd once spotted Derek's plagiarism. You might want to know. He's consulting for a smaller firm now. Nothing big, but they reached out asking about past collaborations. I asked what she said. Just that honesty isn't his strong suit. I replied with a simple thank you. She added, funny thing though, he didn't deny anything. Just said, I guess people remember what they want. That sentence stuck with me for days. Because it was true in a way. People do remember what they want. But memory, like reputation, has a way of crystallizing around patterns. And Derek's pattern had finally caught up with him. Sarah and I finally bought the lake house that summer. It wasn't big, but it had quiet mornings, mist rising over the water, her laughter echoing off the porch rails. I started working remotely more often, taking morning calls with coffee instead of commutes. One day, as I sat at the dining table with the lake glinting behind my screen, I got an email from an old coworker. Funny how things turn out. Derek's new company folded. Something about unpaid contracts and false client claims. Karma's got good timing. I closed the email and stared out at the water. For once, I didn't feel vindicated. Just done. The whole saga had stopped feeling like a wound and started feeling like a scar. Permanent, yes, but healed. A few weeks later, the journalist reached out again. She wanted to know if I'd be open to doing a podcast episode, a long-form discussion about redemption and accountability. I thought about it for a while. Only if it's not about him, I said. Make it about what happens after the rumor, when you're left rebuilding the quiet parts of your life. She agreed. When we recorded, she asked, if Derek were listening right now, what would you say? I paused. Nothing, I said finally, because I think silence says enough. That episode became the most downloaded one of her series. People resonated not with the revenge, but with the restraint. One listener commented, sometimes the best revenge is showing up whole. I couldn't have said it better myself. Months passed. Seasons changed. Then, one evening, Sarah and I hosted a small dinner. Friends, coworkers, a few neighbors. As we sat around the fire pit, one of them brought up my story. I still can't believe you didn't fight back, someone said. I would have burned the place down. I smiled, swirling my drink. I almost did, I admitted. But then I realized I didn't want to smell like smoke. They laughed, but I meant it, because fighting fire with fire might make you feel powerful, but it also makes you flammable. When the guests left and the night settled, I looked at the empty glasses on the table, the faint glow of embers fading to ash. That's what the rumor felt like now. Something that once burned, now cold, silent, harmless. I picked up the last glass, rinsed it in the sink, and caught my reflection in the window. For the first time in years, I didn't see the man who'd been wronged. I saw the man who'd rebuilt. And maybe that's the real revenge. Not their downfall, but your restoration. The lake was glass that morning. No wind, no ripples, just a soft mist curling over the water like the world had decided to pause. I sat on the porch with my mug, the same chipped one from the office years ago, and realized it had been exactly 2 years since Derek's rumor first reached HR. 2 years since I'd felt that pit in my stomach, that helpless sense that truth wasn't enough. It felt distant now, like a story I'd once read about someone else. Sarah came out in her robe, holding her coffee the way she always did, both hands around the cup, fingers tucked under for warmth. "You're up early," she said. "Couldn't sleep," I replied. Thought I'd watch the fog burn off. She smiled. You've come a long way from the guy who used to check his work email at 4 a.m. Yeah, I said quietly. I finally stopped waiting for fires. Later that morning, as I was scrolling through headlines, one caught my eye. Former consultant indicted for fraudulent reporting in corporate audit scandal. I clicked it before I could stop myself. There he was, Derek Vaughn. The article was brief but brutal. Falsified expense accounts, duplicate invoices, a fake client shell. The very thing he once accused me of doing, now proven to be his own undoing. His mugshot was small, but I recognized the eyes. Same restless confidence, only dulled by consequence. For a long time, I just stared at it. Not with satisfaction, not even relief, just a quiet, exhausted kind of understanding. The universe didn't need my help after all. When Sarah saw the headline later, she froze. That's him, isn't it? Yeah. She leaned closer to the screen, then looked at me. Do you feel anything? I shook my head slowly. I think I used up all my anger on the way here. She reached over and squeezed my hand. Then let's keep moving forward. That evening, I sat at the edge of the dock with my laptop open. Not for work, but for something I'd been avoiding for a long time. I opened a blank document and started typing. Not a statement, not an article, just everything. The timeline, the emotions, the nights I couldn't sleep, the way people had looked at me when they thought I was guilty, the taste of burnt coffee in HR's office, the sound of my own heartbeat when I realized my career might be over. I didn't write it to publish it. I wrote it to empty it. By the time the sun dipped low and the crickets began, I'd filled 20 pages. When I finished, I saved the file, titled it The Rumor Years, and moved it into a folder marked Archived. Then I closed the laptop. Months passed. The story about Derek's case faded from headlines, replaced by newer scandals. People moved on. They always do. But something in me had changed permanently. I no longer needed to prove who I was. Not to anyone. One afternoon during a team call, one of the newer hires asked, Ethan, what do you do when someone talks behind your back? I smiled faintly. Nothing, I said. Because if you're living right, the truth eventually does the talking for you. The room went quiet, but in a good way. The kind where understanding sits heavier than sound. Later that week, I went back to the city for a small reunion. Same company, different faces now. Lillian had retired, Raj had moved into a regional director role, and most of the old guard had scattered. At one point during the evening, one of the new executives approached me. You're Ethan Shaw, right? The one from the Reputation article? I nodded. He smiled. You should know, that piece has been required reading and onboarding. People say it changed how the company handles internal disputes. I blinked, surprised. Seriously? Seriously. You gave us a mirror. That word again. Mirror. It hit me how full circle it was. After the reunion, I drove through the city alone for a while. Past the old office building, now with a new logo on the front. I didn't stop, didn't even slow down. But as I passed, I could almost see the version of me who once sat in that parking lot, gripping the steering wheel, wondering if his career was over. I wanted to tell him, you make it out, not by fighting, by enduring. The next morning, I found a letter in the mail. No return address. Inside was a single sheet of paper. It read, You were right. I told one lie, and it ate everything else. I hope someday you find peace. I'm trying to. DV. I folded the letter once, twice, and set it on the counter. Sarah found me standing there, staring at it. From him? She asked. Yeah. She studied my face. What are you going to do with it? Nothing, I said. It already did its job. That night, I built a small fire by the lake. The air smelled like pine and rain. I held the letter over the flame until the edges curled, the ink turning to smoke. I watched it lift and scatter, the rumor, the guilt, the years of bitterness, all dissolving into the same quiet sky. Sarah came up beside me, slipping her arm through mine. "Feels final, doesn't it?" "It does," I said. "Finally." These days, when I tell my story, sometimes in workshops, sometimes just to friends, I don't mention Derek's name. I talk about what comes after betrayal, the long, ordinary work of rebuilding trust in yourself, because that's the part no one prepares you for. People think revenge is about getting even. But real revenge, the kind that actually heals, is becoming untouchable in the same place you were once destroyed. And that's what I did. I rebuilt, quietly. I let truth breathe. I didn't lift a finger. And somehow, that was enough. If this story moved you, subscribe for more real-life confessions and emotional journeys like this one.